सिन्दूरारुणविग्रहां त्रिणयनां माणिक्यमौलिस्फुरत्तारानायकशेखरां स्मितमुखीमापीनवक्षोरुहां पाणिभ्यामलिपूर्णरत्नचषकं रक्तोत्पलं बिभ्रतीं सौम्यां रत्नघटस्थरक्तचरणां ध्यायेत् परामम्बिकाम् ध्यायेत् पद्मासनस्थां विकसितवदनां पद्मपत्रायताक्षीं हेमाभां पीतवस्त्रां करकलितलसद्धेमपद्माम्बराङ्गीं सर्वालङ्कारयुक्तां सततमभयदां भक्तनम्रां भवानीं श्रीविद्यां शान्तमूर्तिं सकलसुरनुतां सर्वसम्पत्प्रदात्रीं सकुङ्कुमविलेपनामलिकचुम्बिकस्तूरिकां समन्दहसितेक्षणां सशरचापपाशाङ्कुशाम् अशेषजनमोहिनीमरुणमाल्यभूषां वरां जपाकुसुमभासुरां जपविधौ स्मरेदम्बिकाम् अरुणां करुणातरङ्गिताक्षीं धृतपाशाङ्कुशपुष्पबाणचापाम् अणिमादिभिरावृतां मयूखैरहमित्येव विभावये भवानीम्. Welcome back to our Lalita-Sahasra-Nama, and today will be the last session before the long extended summer break, because as you know, even the gods take breaks. That is why we have yugas after the Satya Yuga, where they had to be very present, and then the Treta Yuga and Dvapara Yuga, where they have to be very active. Then in the Kali Yuga they sort of become dormant. That is why prayers function with less efficacy in Kali Yuga, and why human beings and beings in general in Kali Yuga feel that there is a distance to the deities, or even that they don't exist, which then leads to agnosticism, atheism, materialism. And sometimes these are fine positions. There's no problem with them. It is only that they often follow because of a lack of experience of the deity. So in this sense, one can see that the deities also take breaks, and thus we will also take a break after today, so that all of you can enjoy the summer and you can enjoy the end of COVID, if one can call it as such. But before that, you will have to endure another session. The next name of Devi Chitti Shakti, the energy of awareness, is Dhyana Dhyatri Dhyeya Rupa. That she takes on the form, or she is of the nature of the meditation, the meditator, and that which is meditated upon. And I do want to dwell on this name for a little while, because it's quite an important one. You see, when in Vimarsha practice, you become aware of a state that arises in you, such as a state of anger, or a state of worry, or a state of rigidity, or a state of pleasantness, whatever it may be, boredom, restlessness, whatever it may be. All these states that arise are not in fact separate from you. And by seeing them as something separate, we in fact strengthen the states. And this is a very subtle point. For instance, if there is a lot of anger or discontentment in me, if I perceive this state as something alien to me, something foreign to me, something that is afflicting me, which I don't want, then that state actually consumes more and more of my energy and thus becomes stronger and stronger. This is a contradiction. It is a dilemma, but it is true that we cannot dissolve, for instance, the state of anger by seeing it as something separate in meditation, something we don't want. We can only dissolve it when we truly accept it as an aspect of ourself, coming to expression, but coming to expression in a way that actually brings affliction, brings negative emotions, brings negative consequences. Thus, when we meditate upon anger or happiness or whatever other states arise, we must never see them as separate from the awareness that is perceiving them. The observer and that which is observed are not separate. It's a very subtle point that one can understand only if one has really practiced a little. And it makes all the difference. Because if I see my states as separate from me, if I suppose there is some me over here and my states are over here, then this division is artificial. It is not a real division based on experience. It's an artificial division. And thus I become a kind of split personality who is constantly struggling with their emotions, constantly struggling with their states, and thus spiraling into greater and greater trouble, in fact, greater and greater problems. I can't accept my states anymore. Therefore, I'm struggling with them. I'm fighting with them. Or I want more of that state and less of that state. You see? So this is a very important step, not to see the object of the meditation as separate from the meditator. In fact, they are just two sides of the same. And similarly, the process of the meditation occurring can also not be separated. There is not really someone meditating here and then there is the process of meditation and here is the state or the object being meditated on. These are actually artificial constructs of the mind. They don't really exist if you pay close attention. When you pay close attention, there is just awareness occurring. There is awareness and there is attention towards the observer or towards the observed or towards the process of observing. But that is just because your attention is going somewhere else. In fact, it is just a single awareness, a single field, stream, a single presence of awareness that is occurring. And that awareness is Chitti Shakti. That is Devi. Therefore, she takes on the nature of the meditation, the meditator, and that which is meditated upon. Furthermore, she is dharma vivarjita. She is free from dharma and adharma. Now, most people don't like to hear such a name, and it is also a little confusing, since all we are doing is trying to propagate dharma, trying to strengthen dharma, trying to inspire everyone to go deeper into dharma. So shouldn't we say that she's the essence of dharma, or she's the peak of dharma, the highest state of dharma? Therefore, everyone must aspire to her. Yes, and such names also exist. However, here, the rishis are telling us something. Don't be attached to the good also. Don't be attached to the negative. Don't be attached to the good. Be in the middle, in equilibrium, in a state of equanimity towards both. Why? Because if you reject adharma, such as negative states, negative feelings, negative intentions, negative actions, while clinging on to dharma, the positive, the good ones, the virtuous ones, the auspicious ones, there will always be a tug of war. There will always be an imbalance. You will go into the good one very, very strongly for some time, and then automatically you're going to go to the other side as well. And if you won't go fully to the other side, you will at least find yourself in a struggle with it. Anyone who is a genuine spiritual person knows that this is true, knows it from experience. Only those who don't actually practice themselves just create some sort of idea of spirituality. Only those speak of the supreme, saintly, purely virtuous, purely ecstatic as being a reality, and the other doesn't exist. That's simply not true. The truth is that both extremes have to be integrated into awareness. Both have to be accepted fully. Both have to be unconditionally accepted, and then equanimity comes forth. That is why Sri Krishna says, Sukha dukkhe same kritva, that sukha and dukkha, happiness and its opposite, suffering, unhappiness, must be equal. They must become equal in the sense of there must be equanimity. That is why in our last retreat we practiced equanimity together. Now, the next names are speaking about the 4 states, or 4, of the embodied consciousness. As you know, the Mandukya Upanishad speaks about these: the waking state, the dream state, the state of deep sleep, and then that which is beyond these, the 4th state, or the transcending state. The next name says that she is Vishva Rupa. She takes on the form of Vishva. Very literally it means the form of the universe, or the form of the world. But in this context, Vishva is a technical term and refers to the state of consciousness in the waking state. So, Vishvarupa Jagarini. In the waking state, she is the embodied consciousness known as Vishva. That is the consciousness that experiences this universe. That is right now what you are experiencing, what I am experiencing, is known as the Vishva state of consciousness. Then, Svapanti Tejasatmika. When dreaming, her nature is that of Tejasa. Tejasa means the luminous one, but again is a technical term here and means consciousness in the dreaming state. When we dream, the name of consciousness is Tejasa, the luminous one, because internally consciousness creates all these experiences. The mind generates all these dream experiences. And for the yogi, on the yogic path, it is in fact very important with time to gain a certain lucidity even in dreaming. This is called lucid dreaming, and there are very specific practices that aim at lucid dreaming, to become more and more aware in the dream state itself. Then, in the deep sleep state, Supta, while fully asleep, Prajnatmika. Her nature is Prajna or Prajna. Literally it means the cognizing one or the insightful one, the wise one. But here again is a technical term and refers to consciousness in the state of deep sleep. Our Guruji, Sri Swami Omkarananda, always took this as an example of a state accessible to all in their everyday experience. People go to sleep, they experience the total deep sleep state, and yet this is a state totally beyond ego, totally beyond the ordinary world, and it is also a state of deep rest, of deep relaxation. In the total deep sleep state, we are not afflicted by any trauma, by any identity crisis. These can seep into dreams. We can be afflicted in dreams, but not in the deep sleep state. So he always brought this as an example, as a simile, to understand that even in our everyday experience, such a state is accessible, the deep sleep state. So it is not so hard to imagine that on the yogic path, one can then access deep states of consciousness that are beyond ordinary mind. You see? If even in the ordinary person's experience of their life, every single day almost, one accesses a state that is beyond these things, beyond the mess, it is easy to imagine that the yogi can access the deep meditative state. Do you see the example, the powerful example? It's a very powerful example. And then there is the transcendent state, the state of pure awareness that is beyond the other three, that is not just ordinary waking, is not just dreaming, and is also not deep sleep. And this is known as turiya or turya. And in that state, she is actually sarvavastha vivarjita. In that state, consciousness, Devi, is beyond all states. It is not an ordinary state. It is not an avastha, a state that then changes into something else and is followed by some other state. It is the very consciousness, the very awareness experiencing all states. And this awareness too is immediately accessible to all of us. We must only look directly into our being, completely relaxing, completely letting go of all grasping, of all expectation, of all rejection, and then look into our being. It is like turning around our mind, looking at itself. There it is. That is consciousness. That is awareness. And then, yes, we lose the concentration and the mind goes into something else again. But there it is. That is consciousness. That is awareness. And that is Devi in her innermost nature. That is the ground of our being. That is what will always be with us in all our lives. And that is Turiya. When we become established in it, then we are in the Turiya state. That is, of course, difficult. To glimpse it is not difficult, but to abide in it is difficult, because we are pulled out of it in our samsaric embodiment, our experiences as a human full of emotion and thoughts and work to do and karmas and quarrels and conflicts and family ties and inner ties and outer ties. So all these things, they camouflage this Turiya that is almost always accessible, present within us. Then the next few names speak about the process of creation, dissolution, preservation. The process of creation is known as srishti. So it is the absolute awareness or consciousness that manifests the srishti. And when she does so, she takes on the form of Brahma, the creator. When she sustains, upholds the process of existence, she is known as Vishnu or Govinda in this context, Govinda Rupini. And when she lets it dissolve, when she lets go of it, she is known as Rudra, who causes Tirodhana, the disappearance of all things. And that will happen to this entire universe, not only this world, to all worlds, and it will also happen to each of you individually. Thus, the one thing I can predict is that you're all going to die. Me too, without exception. Thus, this process of creation and then preservation and then dissolution is right now also occurring in our own embodiment. It is not only in the universe that it is occurring, it's also occurring right here with this body. And the more we accept this as being the natural reality, the truth, the absolute truth of all things, and as the Sahasranama tells us, this is the manifestation of Devi. It is she who is taking on this creation, this body, and then its preservation, and finally its dissolution. She is the one taking it on. The more we accept this, the less we are pulled into all the trouble. The more we can accept things as they are. It's simply the truth. This body will pass away one day. It is good, it is healthy to think like this and to accept it fully, wholeheartedly. Much, much better than to push it away and to deny it and to fear it. When we wholeheartedly embrace it, in fact, as the manifestation of Devi, it can almost become joyful. It can almost give us a sense of cheerfulness and a sense of relaxedness. It is like being drawn into her womb again. The process of death is not a process of fear at all. It is returning to her womb and then perhaps taking birth again if there are still further karmas. But learn to see it like this. Don't be afraid of this process. It simply is the reality. See it as a return to her, and then it is all the more healthy. She is Ishvari, the queen over everything, and she is also Sadashiva, the ever auspicious one. Shiva means Kalyanakara, the one who brings about auspiciousness, happiness, bliss, liberation. She is that Sadashiva. She is sitting upon Sadashiva, but she is herself Sadashiva. And in that aspect of hers, she is Anugrahada. She grants grace or favor. This is a whole separate subject altogether. Many people cannot accept the notion of grace, that one is in the favor of the deity. The way to look at it is not that the deity is partial. Devi is not partial. She is nirvishesha. She is without partial. She doesn't like Devika more than Trusharji, although I'm not so sure about that one, but generally no. She doesn't take sides. But there is a good example given by Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, that Devi is like a 9-year-old girl who has lots of jewels in her hands, diamonds, rubies, sapphires, emeralds. And we, the human beings or the practitioners, we're like travelers on a road, and this little girl is sitting there, and no one seems to pay attention to her. No one seems to be open to her. Only some individual who is not so stressed on his journey to the city, who is not so absorbed in himself, but who sees the sweet little girl and goes up to her. And then she gives him one of her stones that she has in her hand, which happens to be a jewel. So grace is like that when we are open to her, when we open ourselves, when we open our heart with devotion, instead of being so self-absorbed on our journey through samsara, which, by the way, is a never-ending journey. It will just always continue if we don't actually learn to come out of it. So if we don't pay attention to that sweet little girl, we will never get the jewels. And I thought this is a wonderful example given by such a great sage, that this is the nature of grace. But of course, for grace to come about, there must be so many different conditions. The first one, the person on that path has already calmed himself a little, or herself, has already learned to pay attention a little. Similarly, we can't really open up to Devi if we haven't learned to calm down, if we haven't learned to pay attention, if we haven't learned to concentrate, if we haven't done a certain amount of punya, of auspicious, virtuous deeds that allow our inner being to open itself up. So you see, there are these conditions, no doubt, and these are brought about through punya. So you see, punya and what is called grace, they always go hand in hand. But you can't say that you do this amount of good works and then you will suddenly have access to the Devi. It doesn't work like that. It's not that the person on the road who then gets a jewel can tell others, hey, there's a little girl up there, just go up to her and she's going to give you jewels. It's not like that. People might then stand in a queue in front of that little girl and the little girl will say, no, these are mine. No, they're mine. You see? So this opening up to Devi is what we are talking about, not a calculated, manipulated activity where we say, I have a mala. This is a beautiful coral mala, by the way, which I made myself. It's not so well done, but the stones are excellent. I mean, the coral stones are excellent. So if you look very closely, the first one even has no, you can't see it, has a white circle. You can't see it, I think. But it's excellent. It's an excellent mala. But there's no way of saying, I'll do so and so many mantras. I'll do them very mechanically. My inner being is not opening itself at all, but I'm just doing it mechanically. Because some Taklu in Switzerland said it, or some Taklu in India, or some Motu in India. You know, some guru, someone said it. So I'm doing their malas and oh, my back hurts and I'm grumpy inside, and you see, that doesn't work. Do you see that? That's not opening up to this sweet little girl. That's just continuing the outer mess of samsara inside. Do you see this? Opening up to her is something entirely different. It is a deep absorption. It is something very profound. It is also not, and please don't be offended, deeply opening up is also not, you know, taking some symbols and chanting Raghupati Raghava Raja Ram. It is also not this profound opening up. I am not a big fan of the bhajan kirtan culture. It's nice, okay. It's better than nothing. It's okay. It's a spiritual disco, yeah? And it's okay. and it's good and it's sweet, but it is not what we are talking about. In the Sri Vidya tradition, it is really something profound to open up. So, for example, we are instructed to first do, there's a series of mantras, stage by stage, step by step. And one is instructed to do the first one 600,000 times, that is 6 lakhs. Now, most people in their whole lifetime don't do 600,000 mantras. But this is only the first one we do in Sri Vidya, 600,000 times. And then it is followed by the next one. But we don't do this in this way. You know, as I just demonstrated, Raghupati Raga, in this way. I'm not, you see, don't be offended. I'm trying to explain to you how we do it. We do it very profoundly, constantly opening up to Devi, constantly immersing deep. It is a meditation, actually. It is not some quick thing like this and being distracted with the mind and jumping around doing something else. It is a deep absorption. And if we don't do it like that, my dears, we can't expect the result. And then the scriptures tell us it is aranye rodanam yatha. Then it is like someone going to a forest and screaming about. Then you can do, the scripture says, 10 million repetitions, 1 crore repetitions of the mantra, and there will be little effect. There will be some blessing, sure. Like with Kirtan as well, there's always some blessing, sure. But you can't expect the real result, which is to feel, to perceive, to cognize, to experience Devi directly as your own being. So please take this to heart, that this is a profound practice. It is not something superficial. It is not a bhajan, kirtan thing. It is not kind of nervous japa thing. I have to do my japa so that I have completed it. Not at all. Then it is better not to do the japa. It is something very, very deep. And then the grace can come, because that is the opening up to her. Then she will start giving you the jewels. Then you can experience it directly. So now let us practice this opening up a little bit. Please relax. Don't be offended by my words. I only mean well. And first, wholly, totally accept the present. Totally accept all your states, all your conditions, all your emotions, whatever is there. Totally accept it unconditionally, as it is, as it arises. And now, from within the innermost depth of your own consciousness arises the ocean of nectar, Sudha Sindhu. An infinite expanse of nectar, a sea of milky, beautiful nectar, with the subtle colors of the rainbow glittering in it, in all the directions of space. And in the very center of the ocean, the sea of nectar, is the island of jewels, Manidvipa. Precious, living, breathing jewels. And in its very center is the forest of Kadamba trees, hibiscus trees, the most beautiful, wish-fulfilling hibiscus flowers. And in the center of this forest is the Lotus Lake. Not ordinary lotuses, but lotuses of enlightenment blossom here. And in the center of this lake is the Shri Chakra in the form of a city, a palace. Shining in golden colors, but also other colors. And you gain access to this palace, you pass through the various layers, and in each layer is a set of powerful goddesses, the yoginis, who embody various qualities, various powers. And as you pass by each layer, you then gain access to the innermost, the central part of the palace, the Bindu. And here there is, seated upon Sadashiva, surrounded by gods and goddesses everywhere, Lalita Tripura Sundari. There is a ruby red light emanating from her entire appearance. She appears as Padmaraga, as ruby light. And you gaze upon her moon-like face. She has 3 eyes, and from her eyes, side gaze, flows boundless compassion towards all beings. And to you. And now this entire meditation process is dissolved back into your consciousness. Everything dissolves. The ocean of nectar, the island of jewels, the palace, finally dissolving into her, and she dissolves into you. So that only your present consciousness remains, and you rest in that. Here we are finished with the session, and if there are any questions before the summer break, please feel free to ask.
Yes. Namaste, Acharya ji.
Namaste.
So, mindfulness, often it's said that we shouldn't identify with our thoughts or emotions. And at the beginning, you were saying we need to see them all as part of us. So the way that I interpreted what you said is kind of see them with equanimity, accept them. But I was wondering what your advice on that is.
Yes, you're very right. Thank you for pointing it out. Sometimes the modern presentation of mindfulness and even other meditation methods is very questionable and is not really rooted in deep experience. Because to say don't identify with thoughts actually creates an artificial separation, and there is a danger in that this can strengthen the thoughts you're trying not to identify with. It can push them away, and this can create some kind of conflict. Let me give you an example. If I tell you now that, Devikaji, don't think of Trusharji.
Yeah.
Trusharji is a bad man. Don't think of him. I'm just joking. He's not a bad man. I always take him as my victim.
We do this a lot, Acharya ji, with pink elephants. We say, do not think of a pink elephant in my work.
So don't think of a pink Trusharji. So what happens if I say that? There's no chance that your mind will actually not think of a pink Trusharji. Right? So that is exactly the same, Devikaji. If I say, don't identify with my thoughts, it's exactly the same as saying, don't think of a pink Trusharji. Then the thoughts are going to occur anyway, which that is their nature to occur. You see, it's the nature of thoughts to occur. And to say, don't identify them, remain the witness in this way. You see, the rishis mean that totally differently. They don't mean it the way that it is presented. What they mean is to witness the thoughts and the emotions and the states that arise, to witness them from an angle of pure consciousness, of pure awareness, not to be drawn into the story of the thoughts. But that is not the same as saying, I am not these thoughts and I am just, I'm only observing them. That's not the same. What is the story of thoughts? So let us take the pink Trusharji. So we've established that you will think of him, the pink Trusharji. The story around that is, how did he turn pink? Does he still have hair? Did he lose his hair? What is the way? Am I losing my hair? What is the way to save my hair? Is there shampoo with, what do you always say? The shampoo, what kind of shampoo is good for you? Right? What do you always say? There's some kind of shampoo that's good for the hair, right? That's the story, Devika. You understand?
Yes.
And this is where the sage says, continue to be aware that these are merely thoughts. But merely thoughts doesn't mean to push them or to reject them. Patanjali aloe vera shampoo. Okay. So Tushaji, you're doing advertisements for the Patanjali company. I hope you don't get a commission for that. But you see that's the story. That's the story. So in meditation, Devikaji, even an advanced meditator can't really avoid the thoughts coming. You see, they fool you by pretending that is the case. They tell you, we don't have thoughts, you have thoughts, therefore you should give us money so we can give you teachings. They're fooling you. It's not true. They're also having thoughts. But the true meditator relaxes. No problem. There are thoughts. No problem. And doesn't go down into the story of the thoughts, but continues to abide within the stream of the awareness of the thoughts and the feelings. So it is like you are allowing the thoughts and the feelings to pass by, which they anyway do, Devikaji. Can you give an example of a thought you had 10 minutes ago that you still have now?
No.
Because if you genuinely look at the nature of thoughts and emotion, they're actually passing by nature. That's the nature. The issue is only the holding on and then the creating of the story of those thoughts. It is proven, Devikaji, that there are very few animals who, when they get into a conflictive situation, a minute later or 2 minutes later, once it's over, still remember that situation. Very few examples. Even, of course, a dog, when he's sort of attacked by another dog, he will remember that other dog the next time he sees the dog. But 5 minutes afterwards, once that conflict is over, the dog is back to its usual, wagging of the tail and everything is back normal. So that means even in animals, emotions, they pass by. Unless and until the situation comes again, of course, because they need to protect themselves. The human being is the being that holds on so much with memory and with constructs and with stories and identities, and sort of modern culture has made it even worse. And sometimes, Devikaji, you're a psychologist or psychiatrist, but sometimes I would say even the modern psychological theories, sort of the Freudian, Jungian, Adler, all that stuff, has actually strengthened the problem, has solidified the problem. Because now, in the past, let's say 150 years ago, 200 years ago, when people had sort of, difficult emotional things, they didn't go all the way back to their childhood and blame it on their father and their mothers. This has created a whole new construct of how troubled I am. And Devika, I'm not denying that childhood experiences influenced that. I'm not denying that. The point is the story around it, the whole story around it. I was abandoned by my mother. Once for 2 days I had to stay elsewhere, and because of that I have a trauma now. You see, I'm exaggerating, but isn't that what people are doing? And by telling themselves this story, they are strengthening the problem rather than actually dissolving it.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. And I guess what you said about animals, I guess young children are quite the same. And I agree with you that even though I am a psychiatrist and psychotherapist, I've actually specialized outside the Freudian style, because I have exactly the same opinion about that. So am I right that you're not, because just thinking of Vimarsha, I found that really useful in terms of almost, observing rather than getting caught up. So what my understanding is, you're not saying, when you say I am the thought, you're not saying get caught up in it, but you're also saying don't resist it. You're just saying, it's there. There's nothing to be frightened of. And
there's nothing to be frightened, and it's allowed to be there. Nothing to be frightened, and let it take its ordinary space and then continue. So in some sense, relax into everything being all right.
Yes. Okay, thank you so much.
Acharya,
Yes, please, Tushaji, yes.
yeah. So I guess what I wanted to understand is that the images in the unconscious mind, right? Let's say we've got the Devi Tripura Sundariji here, and we fixate. There's a physical image there, right? And I appreciate it. Be a subtle form as well, but are we then to then sort of almost fixate that physical form into our unconscious mind when we're visualizing, and then focus on that? And then isn't that sort of the whole pink elephant scenario again as well?
So here there is a better example that, first of all, the scriptural statement is, and I'm not just following the scripture, it's also my experience, but I'm telling you the scriptural statement is that Tvad rupam bhavyamanam bhavati bhavabhayo chittaye janma bhaja. So, pashyantyeke sakopam praharanakiranot gurnadodandakanda vyapta vyomantaralam, and so on and so forth. So the statement is that by meditating upon your form, samsara is cut through. That means meditating upon the form is an antidote to our samsaric fixation. So by maybe not even this picture, there are better renderings of it. This is a very human way. I don't really prefer that. It looks very anthropomorphic. But the deity shouldn't be so anthropomorphic, actually. She's ruby colored is radiating, ruby light is radiating. By meditating in this way, Trushaji, many things happen. First of all, there is the sankalpa of the rishi who revealed the technique. I hope everyone is paying close attention. The rishi who revealed the technique is often forgotten in modern Hinduism. That rishi's mind was not an ordinary mind, but a mind of someone who pierced to the deeper dimensions of reality. And that rishi formulated, sankalpta is the Sanskrit word. Sankalpa and sankalpta are closely connected. With his or her sankalpa, created this form to meditate upon. And with his or her sankalpa, formulated that whoever really does this with devotion will get the result. You see, this is an aspect that modern Hindus totally forget about. They think, oh, all the gods, they look like this, they look like humans, and then you see sort of the more rational Hindus start seeing that critically. And they look like humans, they have feet, they have legs, do they go to the toilet, right? So you understand? So this whole anthropomorphic thing is a problem for modern people. But they forget the rishi behind it. So the rishi could have just as well said, focus on a ruby red expanse of light as you do the mantra. And now, Tushaji, you will be surprised. That is precisely what many Sri Vidya techniques are about. In many Sri Vidya techniques, you do not visualize a human sitting there and all that. Sometimes it becomes more abstract. The yantra, in fact, is the abstract form of the deity. So you see, if the deity is a human lady sitting there, if this is meant very literally, how is it possible that the yantra works just as well? This is the sankalpa of the rishi behind it. So this is the first point, Tushaji. That, remember, there's the sankalpa of the rishi. That when you visualize in this way, with devotion, correctly, properly, it will give you the benefit. It will have more than an ordinary effect. Now there is a second point. And this is even more subtle. Trusharji, Devikaji, you are the only two who have their screen on. That's why I'm addressing you. What happens if I tell you to visualize a strawberry? Take the strawberry slowly, and you bring it closer and closer to your mouth. You're opening your mouth. You're putting into your...
stimulate the other senses and cause a kind of a synesthesia almost.
And what happens now, Tushaji, when you're really doing that? What happens?
There might be or
saliva, right? Saliva in your mouth. Now, how is it possible that a mere image of your mind created saliva in your mouth? If all these sort of images or visualizations are just man-made and they're nothing, how is it possible that this created saliva in your mouth? Now, of course, the critical mind will say, this is because you've tasted strawberries before, this is because you remember the... No problem, that's no problem, because, my dear, your innermost consciousness already knows Devi. So to visualize Devi is also a kind of remembrance. And that is why many of the visualizations are known as smaret, smarami. I remember Devi, I bring her to remembrance, to my remembrance. Your innermost consciousness already knows Devi. It is only your current sort of, clouded form, confused embodiment that doesn't seem to know it. So when you bring her to mind, the way that the Rishi has explained it, your subtle body also, like the physical saliva, your subtle body reacts to that. There is a reaction in you. And when you do this again and again, not just for a short moment, it has to be trained. When you do it again and again, you will feel that. Many people who visualize Devi suddenly feel something changing in them. Some, sort of like some heat being generated or something else. Yes, Trishaji?
So no, I'm saying that's beautiful. I always almost want to tap into that what's the limit of that inner unconscious, i.e. can that merge into what we refer to as the total unconscious or the Ishvara or the cosmic mind and almost like manifest vasanas from across all yugas and ages and lifetimes?
Absolutely, absolutely. That is why Patanjali explains very well that by performing samadhi upon a specific content, you will get to know the full content of that. Why? Because it's already present for you in your deepest aspect. But you see, the modern human is so clouded and obscured that it is difficult to reach that level of absorption. But it's no problem. You can still taste it. You can sense it.
Aim for moksha, I guess, and then
absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
And Acharya, when you're referring to the way that the Rishi said to do it, is that the meditation that you're doing every session? Is that?
That is one of the meditations. One of the meditations that has been designed by the Rishi. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So let us finish here, my dears. And of course, Trisharji, you're not the only one who can be visualized in pink. You can also visualize Devi in pink or ruby red. So please take all this to heart and also the playfulness of it. And then we shall meet again, if not in this lifetime, in the next. So after the summer break, I wish you all a great time. We will have another Dharmapada session. So probably see you again there. And then we will also put that on hold for the summer break because even the Buddha needs some rest as well. Right? So I hope you are all enjoying. Please remember, Sri Vidya is about enjoying. It is not this bitter, ascetic, this being rough with oneself. I'm going to be rough with myself and I expect to experience bliss with that. That's nonsense. You see that? I'm going to be rough with myself, but I want to experience bliss. It doesn't happen. Sri Vidya is about gentleness, beauty, blissfulness, being kind to yourself, being kind to others, and then experiencing the bliss through that. So why don't you go to Bristol? Why don't you go to Cornwall? Why don't you do something wonderful, together with your friends or alone if you have no friends? I'm just joking, and then make friends, right? So treat yourself well and joyfully. That is this path of Sri Vidya, all right? So see you and enjoy.